Hello, family. Welcome back to Concrete Pastures. I am Nancy Mulemwa Sisi. Oh my God, I am so excited today. This is finally happening. It's been long overdue. Our guest. Okay, before I get into her and, talk about her and how excited I am, for anybody who's new, this is a platform where we highlight immigrants who have relocated to different countries in search of greener pastures. We share our stories of our various experiences and lessons we've learned along the way and offer new perspectives on the journey of an immigrant. So whether you are currently an immigrant, a soon or later to be, or just curious, come along with us on this journey and let's get a better understanding of what it really means to be an immigrant. Guys, we're still growing our community. It's important that you support us. We ask that you support us, subscribe, like, and share our content. This way we can get amazing guests like our guest today. Guys, I'm so grateful to my brother Nosa for this intro, for this connect. Yes, a little bit about our guest today. Her name is Hana Baba. She is a radio journalist, a longtime host of Crosscurrents, the daily news magazine on NPR station KALW in San Francisco. She is also a co-creator and co-host of the Stoop. I hope this is the right pronunciation, and award-winning podcast from Radiotopia PRX that tells stories from across Black Diaspora. Same thing that we are doing here. This is amazing. Her work also appears on public radio programs on NPR, PRI's The World, and BBC. A Sudanese American, Hana enjoys exploring culture intersections and immigrant and diaspora life. She regularly speaks and consults with communities on how to enter media fields that we're going to talk about and affect change in current media narratives about diaspora communities. Welcome, my dear. I am so
Hi.
grateful that you've made time for us.
Oh, Nancy. I am a fan of Concrete Pastures. Immigrant stories are so important. So thank you for the work that you do, and I'm excited to be here.
Me too. Oh my God. So much work that you do. I admire everything that you do, especially in our community, the impact that you are making, and just the representation. It's super duper important. And yeah, let's get started. Let's get the people get to know you. Um, so from a little bit that I know and that you've shared, um, you came here from Sudan when you were younger and then went back to Sudan. Could you just share with us the experience when you were in Sudan? How was that?
Sure, yes. So my parents came here in the 70s,
Mm,
in the 1970s, and I was a baby. So I was like 8 months old.
mm.
And we lived here until I was around 11 years old. And then they made the decision to move back to Sudan. It was the mid 1980s. It was a difficult time to move back to Sudan, not easy, but they did. And so we moved to Sudan. You know, the funny thing is we used to go on vacations, I remember all the time. But this vacation felt different. They didn't tell us we were going to move there. They said, okay, time to go to Sudan on vacation. But then I started seeing different kind of shopping. It wasn't the usual, when we go home, we used to get,
We shop for others.
different. Hey, we used to get the clothes, sometimes
Yeah.
like the toothpaste and the soap and the creams for family back home. And this shopping was different. We were going to get a couch and like a refrigerator. And then a container showed up, a container
Oh,
of
wow.
furniture. And I said, something is different about this vacation. We were in Houston, Texas. That's
Oh,
where I kind of spent most of my years here in the US when I was little. And so we used to go to the harbor at Houston and make sure of the container. And I said, what kind of a vacation is this? Why are we taking all of these things?
oh my God.
So turns out we're moving back. And so it was, I talk to my parents today and they tell me how, it was a difficult decision to make, right?
Mm,
Uh, but they felt it was the necessary decision to make at the time. Um, the US wasn't as diverse in an African way as it is today in the
oh,
mid
got it.
1980s. And Houston, Texas was not as diverse as it is today. And
Mm,
so they had their different communities, like they would go to the mosque for the Muslim community. We speak Arabic. So they
mm,
had like the Arab community, but there were very few Sudanese, and they had the African American community, which
yeah,
my dad was totally a member of the Black Muslim scene there, right?
yeah.
But the Sudanese part was totally missing.
Oh, wow.
And so I think that's why, they decided to go back to get some culture, to raise these kids in some culture and know the family. We
Mm,
go to Sudan. I'm 11-ish. I'm the oldest, and I had a brother who was like 7, and a brother who was like 4, and then a 1-year-old who was barely 1-year-old brother.
mm,
They set us up well there. So my father found a good house that, kind of comparable to living outside the Sudanese
yeah.
kind of life. We had to go to the English schools. We couldn't go to like just the public schools. So in that way, it wasn't bad, right? Like we kind
Yeah.
of had at school, it was mostly kids who were maybe like us, who moved back from England, or diplomat children. So the language barrier wasn't huge there. I think the biggest shock was just the amenities, right?
Oh,
Just
yeah.
like,
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, where is my Burger King? Where
Yes.
is my Chuck E. Cheese?
Uh-huh.
Um, and that is,
McDonald's.
at any time you turn on the faucet, maybe there's no water, the power may cut, things like that.
Yeah.
But what I absolutely loved was family. So we
Mm,
lived close to my father's side of the family, and then we drove just a little bit to my mother's side of the family. And the grandparents' houses there were this like central station, right? Everybody
wow.
comes by every day to give their greetings and say salam to my grandma over here and my grandma over here. And that meant you go and you're there and you're just like a whole day of food and gossip and news. And this person came from the market with fabric and they want us to give our opinions on the fabric.
Yeah.
And this person came with something to eat. And so it was nonstop, just life, right? Like family, and the social life there, I absolutely loved.
Oh, wow. So when did you move back to the United States?
So we ended up doing my father's business was going well there. He
Mm,
did a kind of technology transfer, as they say, in economic circles. So
yes.
he here in the US, he had started in like a computer IT field, and he went to Sudan and kind of opened up a company there that worked in like automating file systems for ministries and things like that. So like
Mm.
computerization
Oh, nice.
um, of the country. And so we ended up doing, so we stayed, right? Like first I felt like it was a trial, which a
Yeah.
lot of people do even
Yes.
today. They go,
Yes.
they say, okay, let me see if I can do this. So we ended up staying. I did middle school, high school, and university in Sudan.
Mm-hmm.
So
Oh,
I came
wow.
back after university, um, as an adult, pretty much, right? Like I was 21. I felt like I was, Sudan didn't have a lot to offer me after that, after where I was. I studied law.
Mm-hmm.
There was no school of journalism. There was no like media was not a thing. You know, back home, it's like the school of medicine and the school of dentistry and engineering and pharmacy and maybe economics is important, maybe business,
Mm,
maybe law.
yeah.
Everything else was like non-existent. Or like you could study what, like social sciences. But first of all, I mean, you know, I think all our African brothers and sisters know that you will get the question, so what are you going to be, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
what are you going to do?
Yep.
Um, and I was not a science person, definitely not a math person. I loved language. That's where,
Mm.
you know, I got my highest marks in school were in English. And I expressed myself well. I loved geography. My mother is a geography graduate, so I loved, you know, like anthropology and cultures and you know, the cultures of different peoples around the world and the tribes
Yeah.
of our uh communities in Sudan and Africa. So you know, it wasn't like, okay, Hannah's going to be a doctor or Hannah's going to be an engineer, which you know, we're raised to believe that if you are smart, you know, Nawal's daughter, oh yeah, she's definitely gonna be a doctor. She's definitely right,
Yep.
because that's the assumption. You're smart, you have some English. Of course, you would go into medicine.
Yep.
So I think people were shocked, but embracing my parents. I think they lived in the U.S. in enough to understand that there are many other fields that can be, you know, um, you can be successful in, and it can be uh, a good field for you to be in. And my father was an economist, right? He studied economy. My mother studied geography. So I kind of came out of that world of social sciences and humanities anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I studied law, School of Law, University of Khartoum, whoop whoop.
Oh,
Um, and but like in my third year of school, the media bug started to bite me, and the radio bug started to bite me,
oh
and
wow.
it bit and bit and bit until it ate me all up,
Yeah,
girl.
it doesn't go away. Once the
Uh,
core is coming, even no matter how much you try to ignore it, it's like you have nightmares if you're not doing it.
if you're not doing something fulfilling too, like, I mean,
Yes.
I have love and respect for all my lawyer colleagues and sisters and brothers who graduated with me. I did
Yeah.
not go that path. I couldn't find myself in law.
Yeah.
I did do postgraduate studies in international law, but you know, again, I was just like following what was supposed to happen, right? Of course, then you do this and then you do this. It's
Yes.
like written
Yep.
somewhere,
Yep.
right? Like you're gonna do this degree and then you have to do this degree. And then I reached a point where my love for media and radio in particular um, far exceeded my interest in law, and that's when I came here.
So
I
where did
started
the
at
love come
mm,
from?
where did what? Sorry.
Where did the love of radio and media stem from?
I think this is also something that a lot of our brothers and sisters in Africa or of African descent can relate to who lived in Africa.
Yeah.
Radio is huge back home, right?
Yep.
We it was much bigger than television and the idea of television. We
Yeah.
grew up, you know, you go to my grandma's house, the radio is on all day. You go to the other aunties and the uncles, everybody has the radio on all day, because that is where you got your news,
Yes.
that is where you got your entertainment. We have obituaries every morning at 6 a.m. on Radio Umdurman, which is the Sudanese radio station.
Mm.
You literally woke up to see who died that day so you
Oh,
can go pay condolences.
yeah.
The
You're taking
theater.
me back.
I mean, I told you age.
No, you are taking, no, not even that. You're taking me back. You know, I forgot that they actually used to announce. on the radio. That's how my grandmother and our community, because TV was not big because no one can afford TV
Yep.
that much. And then we had a small radio, which it was timed. There's certain times that we used to have because we were saving the batteries and stuff.
Yes.
But you've just taken me back. Sorry, continue.
No, absolutely, because radio was central to
Mm.
Sudanese life. You knew what time it was to do something from the
Mm-hmm.
radio, right?
Yes.
Other than like the calls to prayer were on the radio, but also 3 o'clock when that sports show comes on, you knew it was time to go make the salad for lunch. It was a part of daily life. And then one day when I was studying, I was in law school, right? I was studying for an exam and I had the radio on, and I love to go through the dials. That's something that I just love to do. And so what's going on here? And then it goes, shh, okay. And then another station is about to show up, and then another station comes up, right? And they're talking about something different, or there's some different music on. And I've always loved that, just going through the
Yeah.
stations like that.
Yeah.
And so I listened, and there was this woman saying, the English news from Radio Omdurman, Sudan. And I said, the English news? I could do that. Let me listen to the station. And so it turns out that the Sudanese radio station had like 3 hours in the evening where they did multilingual programming
Mm.
in shortwave, the shortwave for the outside world. So if somebody in Europe is listening to shortwave, they can get something about Sudan. So they had this news department. I went and I said, I can do this. I went and they did some training and testing. Boom, 3 weeks later, I'm on the air doing the English news from Radio Sudan. Later on, I went into television as well there. And a lot of people know me. My husband today says he remembers me from the television days and that I look very different. He makes sure to say that. And so I started doing it alongside the law. I was still in law school. I continued this radio work. My parents were very supportive. They loved it.
Very nice.
And that's when it happened. I think also it comes from a love of storytelling. We have, again, all of us, have storytelling in our backgrounds, and the storyteller in the family. And that was my uncle, Al-Baghir. Every Friday, which is the weekend there, we would go and he would tell us stories when the sun goes down and we have this tea with milk and we're all on the ground. And he starts just telling us folk tales and fairy tales and scary ones and beautiful ones. And he knew them. My whole mother's family was handed down folktales from their grandmother.
Wow.
And it's all oral, like their grandmother didn't read or write, but she had hundreds of stories in her head. And I loved it. I loved the stories. And so I think, when I talk today to people about what I do, I really think it's a marriage of these two things, of that sitting with my uncle with the folk tales and listening to stories, and also listening to the radio.
Wow.
Oh, and then your question was, when did you come back here? That was your question. And then I took all of this time. I'm a bad interviewee. I'm a bad interviewee.
Oh, come on.
I circled around and around and around and around. So then,
I give some texture, some meat to the response. So there we go.
So yeah, I graduated. I did a little postgraduate degree in international relations, and then I was like, you know what? I really want to go back. And my brothers had already come back to the US to study. So my dad and my mom were like, yeah, it's time. Absolutely. And I came back I was like 21, came back to the US to kind of figure out this media and radio angle that I had just kind of immersed myself in.
Yes.
So yeah, came back in 97. Yeah.
Got you. Oh, thank you for the memory line. For me, I used to
Mm,
love bedtime because of
mm.
stories. I couldn't wait. Whether it's
Some of
in
them were so scary. Did they tell you the scary stories?
No, my mom was very into fairy tale
Okay,
one.
so no witches, no ghouls,
Oh no.
no ghosts.
No. Mm-mm. She
Okay.
knew I'm a scary cat. And then my grandmother, sister, my grandmother's sister, I used to love her stories
Mm,
also. Oh, her stories. I still tell my daughter, she also loves bedtime stories,
mm.
bedtime because of that. But being here, you get lazy a little
I'll
bit.
tell you some. I'll tell you some when I meet you. I'll tell you some stories that we were
Yes,
told. I'm
yes.
actually in the process of making a Sudanese folk tales project in audio.
I love that. I love that. I think it's needed. Um, I love that
Absolutely.
because I imagine myself. I used to look forward to going to bed just so I can
Mm.
hear the stories. By the time I would even pass out, by the time she's halfway, I'm done already. And these are like repeat stories. I never got tired.
Exactly. You hear them
Yeah.
again and again. And sometimes they change something small. I
Yes.
noticed.
Yep.
Sometimes something small is changed, but it's the
Mm-hmm.
same story.
Yeah.
Oh, I that yeah.
So being
It's
a
such
journalist
an
in
important heritage.
Sudan was more familiar to you, and it's your community, it's your country. How has that been for you being in the US as a journalist? How has
Mm.
that journey been?
So so I knew that I wanted to enter public media and community media versus kind of corporate media.
Mm-hmm.
Because I felt that when I would listen, when I came to the US and I was listening to radio or watching television, the kind of storytelling that really grabbed me was the kind that happened on public radio, NPR stations.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the story that's like those human interest stories where somebody goes out and actually gets the sound of somebody doing something,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like Nancy is here in her place with her children and you can hear the dogs in the background and you they take you to a place um and there's narration and they're telling you a story and it's something important that's happening around you and they let the stories breathe, as we say in
Yes.
radio. It's not that 1 minute headline, right? Not even a minute. Sometimes it's literally 30-second 40-second headline and then they go to a commercial in these more commercial radio stations, right?
Yes.
They need to get to the next thing. They need to get to the sponsor. They need to get to the ad because they're paying
Yes.
the bills.
Yes.
You can't report really 100%. This is a whole discussion, but if I'm sponsored by McDonald's, can I really do a story about McDonald's that's fair? So all of these things started to come in to my decision to get into public radio and public media. Is it the most lucrative part of
Mm.
radio? It's not, right? But then that's a decision that has to be made. Do I want to be in big, shiny, glitzy, glamorous public media? Corporate, private media, and get little snippets of time where I can barely get a thought out,
Yeah.
or do I really need to go into public radio? And so that's kind of why I just started to do internships. I remember my first kind of venture into this world was just local community radio stations. I had moved from Sudan to the Washington, D.C. area, DMV.
Yay.
That's where my brothers were, and that's where I lived. I came to live with them. And so that was, I did like the little Arab community station. And then I worked for a long time with like a Muslim radio station. And then, so just like building myself up, right? Like understanding this world of
Yeah.
radio in the US from
Mm-hmm.
that level, like an entry point. And then I went into kind of internships in public radio and did like a degree in radio here, radio production and announcing, because that was like my strong suit was like narration and announcing and the voice.
Oh, nice.
Um, and yeah, so as of course, every place I went to, I was the only, and not just the only Sudanese, and not just the only African, but a lot of times the only Black person, Black person, period.
Wow.
Um, Huge underrepresentation of brown and Black people in media at that time. Still, and that's again another conversation, but especially at the time, and all of this talk of DEI and diversity, and this wasn't happening yet.
Yeah.
So it was really a test of you and what you can do and who are you and what can you offer. And that's when I moved to California
Oh, wow.
and the Bay Area. I married and my husband's job moved here and we moved. And then I started here at the big public radio station KQED, which is one of the biggest in the nation. I did an internship there, and it's California, so they do have that. We want to understand other perspectives. We want to purposefully include Black and brown people. Right. That's just California being California at the time, right?
Yeah.
And so I did an internship at KQED at that time. My current station, which is kind of the other public radio station in the Bay Area, KALW, we're starting a news department. And they recruited me to come and be a part of that news department, and I am still there many years later.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very
So,
nice.
yeah, so like as a Sudanese person, one of my biggest goals was to really, bring stories about where I'm from, right? And talk to people from our communities. And I didn't limit that. It's not like, okay, Sudan. It was bigger than that. It was a matter of Black communities aren't being reported on enough. And then within that, African diaspora communities, we don't hear about them at all in public media or in media. And then within that, Sudan, right? So if we had something happening in the local Sudanese community and I could make a story out of it,
Yeah.
I would, right? And bring it on the air.
Nice.
But also I found myself to be, when you're a rare species in a place, all of a sudden you're the expert in the country or the continent that you come from.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever there was something going on about Africa, okay, go to Hana. What's going on? How do you feel about this? Da, 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 da. Something from Sudan, I was the person, right? Not even Sudan, Africa, the Middle East. It's just like all of a sudden you are asked about things happening in like Iran and like it's like, I don't know. So it was interesting though, because Muslim communities, Arabic speaking communities, I found that there was such little being reported on that yes, I had to be that person. And first it was like, well, why do I, I fought it a little bit. Like, why can't I just report on, City Hall? But then I really sat with myself and said, you know what? Actually, if you don't do it, nobody's going to do it, and
Yep.
nobody's going to report on these things. And if that's the case, so be it. If you are the person who's going to bring stories about African communities, Sudanese people, whatever it is, then you're going to be that person. And if you don't, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Who's going to do it?
Yeah.
So that's where I found myself, really. I think another passion of mine is to make more of me. I shouldn't be the only one. We shouldn't be the only people. We need to train people up, and we need to encourage people and to enter these media fields and talk to them about, you know what, it's you be the doctor and be the engineer,
Yeah.
and then start a podcast
Mm-hmm.
or create a magazine online
Yep.
or some kind of media to tell our stories, because if we don't tell them, maybe they'll get told by someone else, but they won't be told right. And so it's up to us. It sounds cliche at this point, but it's so true that we need to tell our own stories. And I won't get
Actually,
tired of saying
I
it. People may
agree.
get tired.
I agree with you. I love actually what you said on your TEDx Union City, which I encourage everybody to actually watch it. It's so informative. You also give a side of your story from how you grew up, and um, you are so giving. I love what you said there. Diversity in media makes us more toward to each other, which I actually love because it's so true to all of those words. People don't understand us because they don't know our stories. But when we share our stories, which is part of the reason why we actually do share our stories on Concrete Pastures, people can get a deeper understanding on what we go through as immigrants, as wherever we're coming from, all over the world, from our countries to here, and the journey from
Mhm.
there to here. And if we don't tell it, people have different perspectives on what it's like. People have no understanding until they hear it from us. And people are more tolerable to us now that they can understand. It's like, oh my God, I understand Hannah now because of her story. So I really love that message when you shared that. I was like, oh my God, that's really true. So so what have you been doing? I know you teach podcast journalism. How is that? Podcast journalism.
So when podcasting kind of came out and the podcast boom, right? Like it
Yeah.
was in 2015, 2016, 20, that time. For us in radio, we were like, okay, this is what we've been doing all along.
Yes.
I mean, it's
Yep.
audio, and we're in our stations and in our studios. We've been doing storytelling and stories and news for a long time. But then podcasting came along, and podcasting came, I think, one of the things I say is it democratized audio, because I felt like being in a radio station was great, but there was like a gatekeeping thing in radio, right? You had to be a journalist, you had to apply, da 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 da. But
Yes.
for a podcaster, you can, if you have a perspective, you can be in your house. You do not have to be a journalist. You do
Yep.
not have to be, you don't have to have that degree in media. You have a message, you have something to say, you are able to access that. And that's, to me, a democratization of these airwaves. Like,
Yeah.
people took the matter into their own hands. And I love it. And so when podcasting became a thing, we at the radio station increasingly were beginning to listen to people who were coming to us saying, we want to get into this. We want, even people in the staff, right? We want to do podcasting. We want to reach more people.
Yeah.
We want, for example, for me, I was, at the station KALW in the news department, and I had a friend and colleague, Leela Day, and Leela's African American, and we worked together in the newsroom on our show, our news magazine that we work on. But then we'd go to the kitchen to warm some food up or to make some coffee, and we would be talking about these very Black things, right? Just like, I read an article, she read an article, she would come to me, oh, did you see this? What do you think? Oh, did you see this? What do you think? And we would be talking and talking and talking. She would say, oh, this happened in, this country. What's going on? Oh, this happened in Sudan. And I would say to her, and we'd have all of these conversations about things that didn't fit into the show we worked on.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it did, but not all of it. But we knew we had a show there. We knew we had stories from across the Black diaspora. She was Black, I was Black. We're different kinds of Black, is what we say.
Yeah.
And we have very different perspectives in many things, and we have similar perspectives in many things. And we felt that we needed to have these conversations. So that's when podcasting came about, right? And then we said, okay, let's make a podcast. Let's do a show. And the station, we already have the studios, we already have the microphones, kind of the hardest part of all of this, which is like the infrastructure and getting the microphone and getting the studio. We have that. We live in the studio. And the stations fully supported us when we had this proposal for a podcast we called it the Stoop. And the Stoop is just like the front stoop of a house, like the stairs that lead up to the house where people are hanging out and talking about everything, right? Just casual conversation about life. Oh, this thing happened and this thing happened. And what do you think? Da, 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 da. Someone's munching on something and someone's, back in Sudan, it would be like, what is it called? Tasali. What's tasali in English? Tasali is like sunflower seeds. They would be cracking some, hey, what's going on over there? That's the vibe that we wanted.
Oh,
and that's not a news vibe because we're news people.
Yes.
But we said, you know what? We want to explore stories and include some journalism that we do. Why not try to do both together?
Yeah.
We could take an issue like colorism, for example, and the skin bleaching. We did an episode on that. And we said, for example, we're going to interview some people. And then we've got numbers and statistics on how big the skin bleaching industry is worldwide.
Yeah.
That's journalism.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew we wanted to create something that was podcasting and included journalism, included facts and figures and reporting and interviews, right? Get a historian on to tell us the background behind the history of colorism.
Yeah.
We go and we got the Stanford professor to tell us about something called the brown paper bag test, which I never knew about, but Leela knew about because that's her history.
I only found out about that when I did an interview on bleaching. I had no idea. It was not even on bleaching. We're talking about a movie that was focused on bleaching. And I had no idea that was the brown paper bag test. When I saw the movie, I was like, what is
I
this?
didn't know.
I had no idea.
I didn't know. And so we got like a professor from Stanford University here, an African American history professor, to tell us about this brown paper bag test and how it was used, how people would take, just to tell your audience if they're like, what are they talking about? In the US in the 1950s, 40s, 50s, they had all these social clubs in the Black communities that they would go to. And this is within Black communities. So this wasn't like white America.
Mm-hmm.
So if you came to one of these clubs, you got ready and you were, wanting to have a night out, there would be somebody at the door with a brown paper bag. And if you were darker than this brown paper bag, you would not be let in the club.
Yep.
I totally didn't know about it. And so Dr. Allison Hobbs from Stanford came and told us about it. And that's what we knew we wanted to do. We wanted to interview people. We wanted to get the professor to tell us. We wanted to find research about topics. So in that way, we kind of merged these worlds of, it's a podcast. Me and Leela are talking and we're conversational, but at the same time, we get deep.
Yes.
and do these other things too as well. So that's where the term podcast journalism comes from. It came around that time,
Got it.
because a lot of podcasts were coming out of public radio stations like ours. And
Uh-huh.
so that's what we knew how to do. We knew the journalism, but then we had to learn the hey, what's going on? What's going on? You know, because we weren't used to that. I'm used to,
Yes. It was more
welcome to the
serious focus.
right. It's just like, welcome to the news. This is Crosscurrents from KALW News. I'm Hana Baba. This happened and that happened and that happened and that happened. But the hey, we that had to be inserted.
It
Right?
was a new skill. I'm like, we gotta learn this.
It's a new skill to be, which wasn't a skill at all, right? Like, this is
Yeah.
how we talk.
Yeah.
And so that was a process too. It's like, how do we do that and still be respected by our news audience when we're like,
Yeah.
So that was a process, but that's it. That's the kind of the world of podcast journalism that I talk about.
I love it. I know you are passionate about our community getting to journalism, into storytelling. How has that been going for you? Because I know you are the voice for a lot of us to get into sharing out more of our stories. And for a lot of people, I mean, they feel like our stories don't matter anymore because of what happened, and they feel not heard. What would you tell those people that are thinking in that direction, per se?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because, for example, Sudan is now in a moment of conflict and war
Mm,
since April. War broke out between two greedy generals vying for power. And we've had, deaths and destruction, and all of our families, my extended family
horrible.
has had to flee. And there's this question of, why isn't this being covered and our stories don't matter, right? Um, while other conflicts are well covered and we hear about them a lot. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what's the difference between that community and this community?
Mm-hmm.
And what I found partially is this question of, are you at the table in media organizations, right? Are we inside the newsroom sitting with the editors? Am I a part of the process or not? And I found that, and this is part of the answer, of course, but I found that the more we are at the table in these newsrooms, the more the coverage will happen, right? And I see that the evidence is where I work, right? When we have stories about things going on in Africa or my own in Sudan, and something is said and it is not correct, and I know it's not correct, I'm there to fix it, right? Or if a story about some place or a community and they want to make it, okay, let's make it, 7 minutes, 8 minutes, I'm there to rally and advocate for, no, actually, we need to make it longer because you have this perspective and that perspective and this perspective that needs to happen.
Mm.
And just the sheer quantity of stories about Sudan, about communities, our communities, and on our station are more. Like, the quantity is larger because I am there, and I
Yeah.
totally believe that 100%. So if there was somebody like me in all stations, in all the television stations as well, in all the big papers, the newspapers,
Mm.
of course there would be more stories about Sudan. Of course there would be more. And that's where the care comes from. And if, and it's sad, right? Like, why should I have to be there for somebody to care about my country? Because it's the news cycle. And that's something a lot of people don't realize, that the news cycle in this country is limited. And there is this question of, who is the audience and what can they relate to?
Yes.
And what do they want to hear? And what do
Yes.
they even know about? Like
Mm-hmm.
if we write something about Sudan, will people care? Will people know what Sudan is
Mm-hmm.
or not?
Yeah.
Right. So therefore, me, the media organization, I'm not going to spend time on something like that. But that has led to an American ignorance of the rest of the world, right?
Yeah.
It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
When we go to to Europe or other countries, I mean, this has been going on for a long time, but Americans are honestly laughed at for their kind of lack of knowing of geography and world events and anything kind of beyond the confines of the 50 states of the United States.
Yeah.
And I think it's the media's responsibility to change that. But when it's your bottom line, and again, here, most media is corporate media. When it's your bottom line and you have an audience and there's sponsors and companies that have advertised, are they gonna want a story about, Rwanda or Tibet? No.
Congo, Sudan,
Congo,
all of those.
Sudan,
Yeah.
they're not. So I think it's slow change that can happen and needs to happen. But step one for me has always been be at the table and be there. And I understand people starting their own, because a lot of people I know have been like, we're going to start our own station. We don't need this mainstream media.
Yes.
You're preaching to the choir in that way. If I'm just talking to my people, it's great. My people need that. But I also need to be talking to the rest of the world.
Yes.
I can't just stay in this bubble and expect the rest of the world to care about me
Mm-hmm.
when I'm not talking to them. So that's why I'm passionate about recruiting others into media fields, any media fields you can. It doesn't have to be a full-time, part-time. You don't have to have a journalism degree these
Yes.
days. There's so many opportunities to learn, internships. There are conferences. If there's a conference near you, go to it. There are free resources available online.
YouTube.
So many, and we
Yeah.
can share them. I have many that I can share.
Oh, please do.
Free podcasting courses, free news journalism courses
Oh,
that are just there and they're just available. And it's something you can do in addition to your day job that actually makes you money. Because
yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to lie and say you're going to make a lot of money in this. It's consider it, an endeavor, like, just something you're doing for the cause,
Yes. For the community.
for the community, for yourself, for the next generation. We have kids that are going to grow up in this
They need to know
country.
the truth. Yeah.
They're going to have it better, hopefully, but they'll even have it better if more of us enter these media fields and start telling the different stories about us on our own.
I agree. I agree. I really loved your TEDx when I was watching it because of how much you were referencing on so many areas. Even USLA that UCLA that you referenced to as to the study that they do every year on TV shows, the roles. And it's amazing. I was so amazed that they
Right.
actually see.
The numbers of the demographics, right?
Yes,
Of
the
people
demographics.
in
It,
television and film.
oh my
And
goodness.
notice, I mean, they're actually, when they say that 3% of newsrooms are Black, just three, right? Or like film directors, just like 2, 3, 4, 5%. They're
Yeesh.
talking about all Black people, let alone if we start, zooming into our different communities within Blackness, right? That's just all Black people. And so there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work to be done. And actually, when African Americans enter these fields, I want our brothers and sisters, in the diaspora to understand they're opening the doors. And that's what allows a lot of the times our African American brothers and sisters are opening these doors for us.
Yeah.
When there's a Black person who's done something before us, they're opening the door for us to actually also come in and tell
Yeah.
our stories as well. And in that way, I see ourselves as, that's kind of the Pan-African part in me, in
Yes.
that we all lift each other up. Um, and that's beautiful to me.
Someone here actually said one time that your destiny um your destiny is also dependent on someone else's. So you moving on with your dream, God-given dream, whatever it is, if you don't move forward, you're affecting other people as well. So
I
opening
believe
up
that.
doors for others, it's super duper important. And I completely agree with you with our representation. I remember even watching TV, like whenever I would see Oprah on TV, I'd be so gravitated because she was the only Black person that I could see at the time. And no one was doing what she was doing at the time and reporting what she was reporting at the time. And a lot of people, I'm sure they can relate to this and say, oh my God, yes, she opened up a lot of doors. And when we see so many people now, we need more voices to tell our stories because I mean, talk about transparency, your word.
Yep.
I laughed when you were showing what you were showing on how Africa is seen in people's eyes. First of all, what I get, especially here in New York, is everybody's from Nigeria. Like Africa is just made of one country, which is
Yeah.
Nigeria. Africa is like maybe separate by itself, and Nigeria. Are you from Nigeria?
Right. Yep. Yep.
And then when they show Africa, they do so that picture that you showed, guys, you need to watch her TEDx.
Yeah.
They show
And
always.
some of the more cultured ones, we get, are you
And
from
then the
Ethiopia?
hungry kids.
A lot. We get, are you from Ethiopia? I don't get the Nigeria, but I get the Ethiopia. You're from Ethiopia,
Ah,
so that's like the second largest, right? Just like the
yes,
ones that they know.
yes, true. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm from Nigeria all the time.
Yeah, yeah. My husband, when he's walking somewhere, they start talking to him in Amharic, literally, right
Wow.
away. Yeah, yeah. It's funny.
Wow. So what are your views with what's happening with Sudan right now? Um, what are your thoughts? Because
Oh,
I can't have a conversation with you without talking about the current affairs of Sudan.
absolutely. And we did a special episode on Sudan, on the Stoop and at my station,
Mm,
KALW. Because again, these are the times when the representation is going to matter, right? To
yes.
bring to bring awareness of something happening that nobody else is going to bring, nobody else cares about, but you kind of bring that to your staff, and they see how it affects you. I mean, when this war broke out in April, um, I called in sick. I was very affected, emotionally and mentally. So my people at the station could see that something was wrong with me, right? We have those daily meetings or the weekly meetings, and I was not Hana,
Yeah.
the happy-go-lucky. I was very sad and angry and broke out in tears.
Mm,
And not to say that that's something good, but I just want to relay how this is a whole editorial team of a station. They're all there, and they see that the host of this show is so affected. Therefore, they feel it too, right?
yep.
Like
Energy
everybody
transfers.
at the station now
Yeah.
knows not only knows what's happened in Sudan, knows how it's affecting me. They feel affected too
Yes.
because I'm one of the team. I'm
Yes.
one of them,
Mm-hmm.
right? So now everybody's following what's happening back home, in Sudan.
Wow.
That's a kind of a side effect of being part of a media team in a station or wherever media organization. It's not intended. It's a side effect, but I think it's a good side effect. It's empathy,
Yes.
right? It takes it from this idea of those Africans over there fighting each other
Yeah.
to a humanizing of a conflict that's happening so far. We have Hana in this station that is directly affected by this.
Yes.
They understand that. I've had family that have had to flee by buses, going to Egypt, going to South Sudan, going to the Emirates. The fighting was in the neighborhoods. I have my sister-in-law with her daughter, and my mother-in-law came and evacuated in my house here in California. The huge trauma, right? People that were living amidst bombing and killing, and the numbers of displaced are just increasing every day. The numbers of people just killed is increasing every day, and it's a sad situation. It's an angering situation because, like many African conflicts, it is definitely being orchestrated and supported by powers that are regional and powers that are further away, international global powers.
Yep.
And that's what's frustrating also about this, and it goes back to narrative to me. The narrative of, in Ukraine, it was a foreign power kind of invading, so we can feel for them. In the Palestinian territories, it's Israel, a power that is coming and committing the atrocities, so we can feel for them. But these Africans, they fight all the time with each other. These African countries, this general and that general, and I can't keep track, and what's his name, and what's his name, and what's he fighting for, and what's he fighting for? I can't keep track, so I don't care. Because that's their story. That's how they're gonna be always. Why, like, am I gonna cover Sudan or Congo, or every two generals that fight in a country, I have to care? So that's been the attitude, right? That comes with the narrative that we're talking about. If there's a narrative that these African countries are unstable and they are engaged in these internal conflicts all the time, and that's a given, then why should I care when it happens again, despite the hundreds of thousands of displaced people, despite the tens of thousands of dead, despite it just becomes numbers to them, right? And so if a narrative is changed, then that perspective will change. And so I feel like in this Sudan conflict right now, everybody in their field can do the work that they know to help, right? The doctors are doing their work. The humanitarians are doing their work. There's a lot of people who've had to just flee and leave everything behind, right? And their homes were ransacked by the militias, and everything was stolen. People who've had businesses don't have a business anymore. So there's a lot of people starting from zero now, right? They're in Egypt or the Emirates or in Saudi Arabia, and they're starting literally from zero. And all of us in the diaspora, it's our time now because we're supporting all of our family that have had to evacuate, right? That whole story isn't being told anywhere. I want to be able to turn on the radio or go into the Washington Post or the New York Times and see a story about the one person that had to all of a sudden find themselves in a refugee camp and awaiting the money from their cousin, and how that affects them and how they feel. Because we hear those stories just from other backgrounds, but we don't hear it when it comes to us because, again, because the narrative is it happens all the time. They're used to it. So that's why in my field, I'm trying to do the work that I do, which is number one, just more stories about Sudan. So I was able to do that for our station, and on the Stoop, we've had two episodes so far about Sudan.
Yeah.
But also just keeping on about this message of, see, the more people we have in media, the more people will care about what's happening, and maybe help, and not just in a humanitarian way, but really, push political representatives to ask the questions like, what is the United States role in this conflict that we see, right? That I just read about in the Washington Post or heard about, then they can like turn to people in power and hold them accountable. But they can't do that if they don't care. How are they going to care from the media?
Yeah.
So it's all connected. But it is very frustrating and sad right now.
I'm sitting here because I think season 2 or season 3, I can't remember exactly. I had I think it's season 3, the ending of season 3. We had a refugee tell her story from Congo. And that I couldn't sleep for before I interviewed her and also after. She's here in the US. Her story affected me a lot, and I couldn't quickly forget. Recently, something has just been nudging me to tell more stories of refugees around the world. And I attended a meeting with a group called 55 Faces. It's a group where the author, actually, the person that's holding that group, Michelle, she's been on the show. She's writing stories of African women all over.
Mm-hmm.
And I attended the meeting. It was 3 in the morning, and one of the women there, we connected afterwards. And she's a journalist in Kenya. I asked, her name is Cynthia, which I'm so forever grateful to her. She's introduced me to a few individuals. I've already started doing interviews. So we're doing a series on refugees because of how important those stories are. And you talking here, because I couldn't get myself as to, yes, I understand Coco's story, but it was the nudge. I'm like, I need to understand my biggest why as to why I need to tell these stories. And this just seals the whole, you've just answered every question that I was doubting on how people are going to receive it. Because sometimes as creatives, you think of, oh, this topic is going to be really, impactful to people and all of this. But for me, it was, I need to learn. I'm from Zambia. We've never experienced war. So as much as I'm African, I don't know much about it. And when I was sitting listening to Coco's story, it was a learning episode for me.
Mm.
And also when from the ones that we were already had conversations with, a few from Sudan, when they talk about being in a camp, oh my God, it's so heartbreaking for me to sit here as an interviewer. But if you can brace it, I would ask for anybody who is in the media space for us to continue to have these type of stories to be told. And there's so many people who are listening and who'll be watching for these type of stories. If you are able to, I would encourage that they want their voices to be heard. There's people who are giving a voice to people who are not able to, because there are some that it impacts them so much. They've been impacted so much they can't even
And
talk.
people want to talk.
Yes, yes.
They want to tell stories and they want to talk. Because that was another question I was asked, just like, but you know, it feels intrusive.
Mm-mm.
No, people want to tell their stories.
I can tell you right now, the people that I've been introduced to, they live in Kenya. Some are from different parts of Africa,
Mm,
but they want to tell their stories.
mhm.
Some have written books and they want to tell their stories in a way that nobody else tells them, their story in a way that's not theirs. Because
Yeah.
if when people, because even when someone tells me they are in a camp, so I'm thinking this is a nice place. I don't know.
Mhm.
It's a nice place. You have food, you have this, you have that. But once you hear someone's story as what is it like to live on a camp,
Right.
it's
Right.
a whole different ballgame.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And then when that story is told, it can be on a podcast, it can be in a magazine, it can, you know, these days with social media, it's
Mm-hmm.
just incredible how fast a story can just travel
Yeah.
and how many people can see it. And then somebody like me in a station sees it and says, we need to do that on the station. And then we take that person and we interview them. And then all of these other people are listening. And
Yes.
then somebody else hears it in New
Yeah.
York and says, what a story. Because a human story is a human story,
A
right?
human story is a
A
human
human
story,
story
for
is a human
sure.
story.
Yes, I agree.
Absolutely.
I
So
agree.
that's how it is. That's how it is.
Yeah.
It's, you know, we can do this. I really believe we can.
Yeah.
And it just needs a little bit of will and
Mm-hmm.
time. But if you can just start your media project and connect and network on these social media apps, you know, if I go on Instagram and see some of the people that you've interviewed, right,
Yeah.
on Concrete Pastures, and they
Yes.
say, oh my goodness, this is an amazing story. Hey, NPR, there's an amazing story here. There's a refugee in the Bronx, da, 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 da.
Yes.
And then they connect. And then it's a story, it's a national story then,
Yeah.
or international because the BBC wants to pick it up.
Yes.
So this how it can happen. So like it's shows like yours, Nancy, are so valuable and so important because, and I want you to understand this too.
Thank
It's
you.
not just the reach of it, the potential reach
Yeah.
is so huge. It's not just your podcast that you're doing interviewing people. It's somebody at NBC who was sent an episode of Concrete Pastures because the story was amazing
Yeah.
and they want a story. Or somebody who happened to be from Michigan and I'm covering Detroit
Yeah.
as a journalist.
Yeah.
Oh, this person, I heard this person on Concrete Pastures. My sister sent it to me. My brother sent it to me. He works in the networking happens.
Yes.
And then it lands on the desk of somebody, a journalist in Detroit. And guess what? They're right there so they can interview with them. They can go to their house where they are and do a live interview too.
Yeah.
So that's why when people say, you know, I'm so small, who's, you know, my audience is limited, it isn't just your audience.
Yeah.
Other people are looking
Yes.
for inspiration, for story ideas. People poach story ideas from each other all the time.
Yes, I know.
People, you know, they see a guest on a podcast, they want
Yeah.
the guest, they
Yes.
take the guest too.
Yes. I got you from my culture class.
See, it's a network, and
Yeah.
we're all looking and we're all searching and we're all looking on the social media. So
Yes.
you never know if that African person, if there's a story from Zambia and you do a story with somebody from Zambia and there's a Zambian American at the Boston Globe or
Yeah.
whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and they follow you, they might do a story that ends up on the Boston Globe
Yep.
or, you know, or the Washington Post, or so that's how it works. But imagine if there was an African in every media outlet in this country.
Oh my God.
It would
Sorry.
be amazing.
My
That's
kids
the
are
dream.
going
That's the
nuts.
dream, Nancy.
Oh my God, God. Oh, lovely. Oh my God. Listen, I can talk to you forever, but I'm so happy that you've been able to fill in my gaps because I'm very passionate about the story that is about to be told. I
Mm.
have a number in my head of how many I would like to do and release it as a series as for people to have a reference, even someone who's a refugee to go there and get some encouragement. I'm not the only one. And for people who have never experienced it like myself, for to learn, to understand, at
Mm.
least to show up in some way or another for our brothers and sisters that are around the world experiencing this. And then I
And
hope,
you're in a unique place to do that, New York City.
yeah, yep,
Absolutely. Yep.
yep. So you've been here a long time. You've had your journalism journey, your experience, your family. Um, my last question to you, do you feel you are fulfilled with the work that you do? Do you feel you found your success or or you're still on your journey to make a difference?
I don't think the journey ever stops
Yeah,
until we leave this world, honestly. We will always be part of a journey. I am happy where I am and fulfilled and feel a level of success within the world of public media where I am or podcasting. It is my honor to tell our stories. It is an absolute honor
yeah,
to tell the stories of our people. Um, I hope to do more and more. One part of the journey that I wish would go faster is this idea of recruiting, of really, really convincing people to enter media fields, to start their podcast, to go get that degree, to go start that magazine,
yeah.
whatever it is, a Substack, whatever you can. That, if I see more of that, I will be even in a better kind of sense of satisfaction.
Yeah.
But I still think we have a long way to go, but it's getting better. But yeah, I mean, I can't complain. I'm grateful. I'm always grateful. But the journey doesn't end. The journey's, continuing.
Listen, this has been such an honor, and I'm so grateful for you for making time to share your story, to share what you do for our community. And I just wanted for people to get to the insight of what you do and the impact that you've already made for our community. Guys, follow her on social media. I'll have all the everything in the our show notes and see the impact that she's making for our community. It's really impressive and it's life changing. It's life changing. And if you can, please join Media Space. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. If I can do it, I don't have no training. I went on YouTube to learn. Every single night, I was there 2, 3, 4 hours learning. So I'll have all the links. But a lot of people ask me, for people who are interested in journalism, they ask me, are there any grants out there that you may know?
Yes, absolutely. There's so much money out there. So
Mhm.
much money. You just have to know where to get it. And so there are, I think one of the best places uh, to find a number of these resources and grants is the ICFJ. Um,
ICFJ.
I think, yeah, International Center for Journalists.
Oh, there we go.
Easy, easy peasy. And so the International Center for Journalists, the ICFJ, is an excellent resource. They have an always updated list of grants, of opportunities,
Mm,
of learning opportunities, of like job opportunities,
lovely.
training opportunities, and money and contests and awards. Um, for people all around the world. A lot of them are African based or for African creators and media people who want to get into media. So that
Okay.
is definitely a central place that I still go to just to check things out. but if you can bookmark that for yourself, icfj.org, it's an excellent resource. So I think that's the best place to start.
Thank you for sharing that. It's going to be a great resource. I'll check it out myself.
Yes, please. Lots of money out there.
Yeah.
And other communities have figured out where the money is. It's our turn.
Yes. No, I'll be checking it out myself. Again, thank you so much, Hana. I'm so grateful for you. It was such an honor to have you on. Truly.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you so much. It was wonderful to be here, and congratulations on everything you're doing as well. You're doing the work that I'm talking about. So
thank you so much.
Keep going.
Thank you.